Well, the world's trade ministers have gathered in Abu Dhabi meeting for the first time in 3 years, in 2024 at a ministerial conference. This is the first meeting, and as I mentioned, a couple of years. Jim Stenman has more on key issues discussed on the first day of discussions.
The first day of the 13th World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference has concluded, with 3 more days to go. It witnessed the gathering of high-level trade ministers from around the world in the UAE's capital, Abu Dhabi, to agree on new global commerce rules. The trade regulation watchdog, established some 30 years ago, governs the majority of global commerce. However, striking deals by consensus is often challenging given the number of countries involved, and trends such as the economy shifting to some extent into separate blocks. Key outcomes expected from the ministerial meeting include the accession of 2 new countries, Comoros and Timor-Leste, and the group also aims to push through a deal with nearly 120 countries to eliminate development hampering investment barriers. Ongozo Nkonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the World Trade Organization since 2021, attempted to manage expectations as the 4-day conference opened, given the current geopolitical situation the world faces. She mentioned wars, tensions, and elections as potential factors that could hamper the organization's ability to deliver on all its objectives during this ministerial gathering here in the UAE. Despite this, she called on ministers to, quote, roll up their sleeves and complete negotiations, but appear to rule out any deal on reforming the body's mothballed appeals court. Jim Stenman, CGTN, Dubai.
Okay, now joining us to add more insight and discuss the meetings and the impact on global trade in general is Jeff Moon. Jeff is the president of consulting firm China Moon Strategies, plus a former assistant U.S. trade representative for China. Jeff, let's talk about the significance of the WTO meeting in Abu Dhabi. First time in a couple of years they've had the chance to meet. There hasn't been any meaningful deals among the members for quite some time. How important is this gathering?
I think it's very important because, as you said, this is a meeting that happens only every couple of years. This is a meeting of the top officials at the ministerial level. So in the preceding years, people at the working level have been working on a variety of issues. And this is an action-forcing event to try to get the ministers to resolve these things so that they can move forward. And there are a variety of issues that are on the table.
Yeah, there are a variety. And let's talk about some of the challenges going on right now. We just talked about the challenges to shipping in the Red Sea area with the Houthi rebels and the fact that it is having such an impact on Europe. But about 60% of the goods that China moves to Europe goes through the Suez Canal, so it's going to have a big impact there, especially just considering China's muscles in terms of its export.
Right. There's, in addition to these trade negotiations, there are a variety of geopolitical factors that are affecting how trade works. And these conflicts, in addition to the emergence of various trading blocs and other conflict that has risen up in the trading system, are causing problems that need to be resolved through negotiations like this.
Yeah, and we can't talk about that without talking about the nationalist economic policies that are on the rise around the world. And I think in many ways you can look back to 2016 at what former U.S. President Trump kind of initiated. How much of this can impede rules-based global commerce in what is simply global trade now?
Well, everyone says that they are in favor of free trade, but the problem that the WTO has experienced really over the last couple of decades is that increasingly the way people are behaving is not in accordance with free trade. There are some countries that, the WTO is a market-based organization. There are some countries that have state-led economies that are not compatible with that. There are other market-based economies that are behaving in ways that are also not compatible with that. And this contradiction between what people are saying and what people are doing is why we have the logjam that we do at the WTO.
And let's also talk about the U.S. Trade Representative released a report last Friday on China's WTO compliance. And in it, the U.S. take is that China is embracing a state-directed, non-market approach to the economy and trade, despite being a WTO member for 22 years. Now, this is something that China says isn't the case, strongly disagreeing with. Give us your assessment, your reaction, and what do you think the end result of this is going to be?
The end result is, quite frankly, the friction that we're seeing right now. If you don't think that China is a state-led economy, well, then just read the 5-year plan and all of the other implementation plans. Read China 2025, the variety of ways the Chinese government plans and tells the world exactly what it's going to be doing, and it implements it in that way. The problem is that that causes discriminatory results because in a market economy, you don't have those kinds of forces. And that is the reason why we have the friction we do right now.
Okay, let's talk more about that friction and what you think the potential harm is, considering the two largest economies in the world are now going through this friction.
Well, I think the problem is, and the WTO is a great case. The WTO for decades was in charge of liberalizing trade, and that process has slowed down. And the liberalization process has slowed down, and the scope of the issues that they're discussing has also narrowed. During the Doha process, which ended in 2015, we were talking about a wide trade agenda. Now the key issues at this meeting are things like fisheries, digital trade, food security, and dispute settlement. And those are all important issues, but the scope of those issues is much narrower than it was when the WTO was really in its heyday.
Okay, Jeff Moon, we really want to thank you for your insight into this as well. Thank you again.